Hello, hello, hello. Are we all breathing a sigh of relief now? It has been the longest week in history, I swear. But it's over. Everything's looking good right now. People are calming down. Everyone's kind of relaxing, easing into things, which is great. We're coming into the holiday season, which is always a wonderful time. I personally can't wait to start decorating for Christmas. I know it's a little early, but this year I feel like there needs to be this overwhelming cheer and happiness. So I'm going to probably start doing my Christmas decoration a little bit early, just to help kind of bring that feeling into the house. Hey Joe, how you doing? Are you ready for today's chapter? Actually, I know I said last week I was only going to read one chapter, but when I went through looking ahead, I was like, oh, these next two chapters really go together and they're really, really good. So today we're going to do chapter 15 and 16, so extra special treat. And that is from, as you can see, the Agents of A.S.S.E.T series. There are currently 4 books in the series. We are reading book number 1, and I am working on book number 5. So let's get started on today's reading because we've got some really fun stuff to show you guys today. So, all right. Chapter 15. And if Rebecca's out there, definitely count my flubs today because it's been a really bad allergy day. The wind's kicked up around here and I can't even, it's just bad. I've been coughing all day. So here we go. There we go. Already number 1. Chapter 15. Books were good for one thing: information, answers without having to ask the right questions. Devon had given her a wealth of material to study. Most read like character guides for games she played, but one in particular was filled with an intriguing mythology. Sage traced the charts of various pantheons of the gods, seeing familiar names from her childhood history lessons. Every culture in the world had their own take on the beginning of time, and those who ruled the heavens. While this book provided no confirmation of one god over another, it tied together links and similarities within the various mythologies. And before them all came a small group of beings that appeared to predate human mythology. The great gods before the dawn of man each blessed the earth with their creations: ethereals connected to the heavens and knowledge, elementals connected to the physical realm, shades connected with the world unseen. Blessed with unique abilities from the deities that sired them, each claimed supremacy, believing that they were destined to rule over all who dwelled within their realm. The earliest of these demigods were violent warmongers, who quickly learned that they could absorb and manipulate magic from those they destroyed in battle. An ever-growing lust for power saw whole races of demigods wiped from history as wars for supremacy raged for centuries. Wow, really doing good today. All right. The original gods who left their creations to cause chaos had long since lost interest in the world, leaving only Mother Earth to provide a solution and ensure the survival of the other creatures inhabiting the world. From the blood-soaked battleground, a great tree sprouted, reaching high into the heavens. Its roots tapped into the very core of the earth, a great tree of life. It bore the fruit of a new race, Terras, rooted in the heart of the earth and connected to the life force of each race that had come before them. They were bred to counter the problems of the other 3. Terras were light to the shades, physical form to the elementals that they couldn't manipulate, and like a sponge, they could absorb the magic of the ethereals without taking any of the effects. Excuse me. Mother Earth's most perfect creation, Terras were the counterbalance of all that had come before them. Through their efforts, peace and order were established among the races, allowing the world and all the creatures inhabiting it, I don't know why I can't say that word today, giving them a chance to flourish. The way her people were described in the books infused Sage with a sense of pride that she didn't feel worthy of. The Terra race seemed superior and noble. Gods with a little g in the grand scheme of things, but outside the pages, Sage was no god. How could she count herself among such special creations? Her mother, on the other hand, had been truly special. Miranda had undoubtedly been a Terra, fighting the good fight. I cannot read today. Fighting the good fight to keep safe all the people of the earth. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Know that I have never once left you vulnerable, and even in my absence, I have thought of your protection. Sage grasped the tree-shaped charm dangling around her neck. Her mother had always been a protector, even when she left Sage behind as she went off on assignments around the globe. Now Sage knew that it was all in the name of keeping the world, and by extension, Sage herself, safe from harm. Miranda Cynwrig proudly continued the legacy of the Terra race until her light had been extinguished. And now the same duty fell on Sage's shoulders, and the weight of the mantle threatened to crush her. She wasn't ready. Her mother had known it. You're not truly ready for the darkness in this world, but you must find the strength in the days to come. Our family is special. We share an inner light that's passed down from generation to generation. Find the light within yourself and allow it to illuminate your future. Remember that true strength comes from determination. Like your birthmark, you must find new avenues when one becomes blocked. There is always another way. Defeat is not an option. Admiring the silver tree pendant, she turned it over in her hand, comparing the markings to her wrist. The tree of life. More than just the mangled veins below her skin, it was a branding of the gods, as a reminder of her connection to the world, rooted in the blood of the earth and linked to all who shared that blood. Her mother's final wish had been that she keep this pendant close to her heart, so she would remember the light they all shared. Even before she had found the pendant or read the letter, her mother's light had found her. Disguised in a dream, Miranda had already visited to say her goodbyes and awaken that light within Sage. She traced the patterns of the branches with the tip of her finger, following each one as it twisted and twined with the other branches down to the trunk of the tree. Set within that trunk was an infinity symbol. That reminded her of the connection they shared. She pressed on it, and it clicked like a button, and opened a hidden chamber in the back. More secrets. A tiny maroon-colored pebble tumbled into Sage's hand. Small and insignificant as it looked, it felt heavy. She picked it up, wondering what secrets it held. Precious gems had special cuts to make them twinkle. This chunk of rock had none of that luster. As plain as it appeared, Sage sensed that it was important. Something to bring up the next time she spoke with Mark. Her phone sat charging on the edge of the bed, and she picked it up numerous times and laid it back down just as quickly. For all the explanation that Mark might be able to provide her, she hadn't come to terms with the feeling of betrayal, knowing that he'd kept all this secret from her. He'd always been like a father. He protected her, kept her safe, and because of that, she trusted him. Yet even after she had come down to retrieve her mother's things, he stayed silent about all of this magical destiny crap. Had he told her the truth, then and there, she might have stayed, but he remained quiet. He let her leave, thinking that Miranda's plane had gone down somewhere in the ocean. Why lie? Why let her learn the cold, hard truth from someone who was just as icy? As much as she wanted to confide in Mark, her emotions ran too raw. Time would smooth them, and then she would confront him about hiding the truth. She stared down at the tiny rock, wondering what secrets it held. Nothing was as it seemed in this world. That was a certainty. Alarm bells began to sound around her. A red light flashed above. Her first thought was that this was some kind of training exercise to test her reactions, but in the hallway, the sounds of frantic footsteps said otherwise. Sage quickly secured the stone back in its hidden setting and rushed out to see what was going on. More lights in the hallway flashed red. Alarms continued to blare. A fire, perhaps? She followed the direction of others running and headed towards the main lobby. A fight had broken out, and agent against agent, or so it seemed. Sage had no way to distinguish each person from the other, though some of the fighters looked as if they had seen better days. A woman whose eyes sagged with deep purple bruises fought with a fierceness that belied her fragile appearance. Like a corpse reanimated, all the color had faded from her skin, but she moved just as quickly as any of the others. Sage watched from the sidelines as a blade sliced open the woman's pale skin, sending a splatter of black blood to the ground. What was the word that Gray had thrown around? Darkling? Were these the beast he had warned her about? That if she didn't come in for their care and safekeeping, would attack her? And here they are within the walls of A.S.S.E.T. Weapons whizzed through the air, and painful shrieks preceded the thudding of bodies hitting the floor. Still, above all the sensory overload, alarms screamed their staccato warning. Trapped, weaponless, and uncertain what to do, Sage clung to the sidelines, hoping against hope she wouldn't be spotted. With any luck, the battle would end before the fighting found its way to her. You should be in your room. Gray startled her, coming up from behind. Holding machete in one hand and a large dagger in the other, he looked as if he'd already seen action. Both weapons carried the stain of blood. What's happening? She squeaked, fearing as fear gripped her throat so tightly that she could hardly eke out the words. His face was speckled with the same thick black blood, but he still managed to keep that stupid fedora on his head. Remember what I said about darklings? Sage nodded, wishing that she had not already guessed that truth. Yeah. Now you know why they're so dangerous. Go back to your room and lock the door. Gray ordered as he returned to the fight. No way in hell was she locking herself in a room with no exit. She'd seen plenty of horror movies that had ended badly for people who made that stupid mistake. But staying in the thick of it all was just as bad. The elevator was out of the question, too, but there had to be some kind of staircase somewhere. Sage crept around the edges of the battle, hoping that if she followed the hallways to their end, she might find another way out. She kept watch on the fight in front of her, slowly backing away from the fray until she butted up against something that wasn't a wall. Sorry, she started to say instinctively, but her voice faltered as she turned to see what she'd run into. Eyes that had once been turquoise stared down at Sage. Black as night and circled with blood, they held a deathly gaze that betrayed no recognition, though they clearly had their target. That can't be possible. Sage's heart thundered as if it were trying to punch a hole straight through her chest. It was her nightmare all over again, only this time she was wide awake. Sage pinched herself just to be sure, but the pain only served to sharpen her voice as she called out, "Mom?" Chapter 16. Miranda was a darkling. That's what Ava had said. And now she had proof. With the sallow, sagging skin and eyes dark as the poison blood now running through her veins. But it was still her mother standing there in front of her. Emotions warred within Sage, fighting for control as she stood frozen in place. Her mind screamed, "Run!" She should. If what she'd been told was correct, then the creature standing before her wasn't truly her mom. Gray had said darklings retained only their strength. Sage knew better than anyone how deadly a fighter her mother was. She'd seen Miranda in action and marveled at her grace and agility. Her heart threatened to shatter into a million pieces if she left her mother in this sad state. No matter what happened, this was Miranda Cynwrig. This was her mother. The one person in the world that she'd been so desperate to see. She prayed to any of the gods that might listen to return her mom. And here she was, her own personal superhero. If anyone had the strength to overcome bad magic, it had to be Miranda. She had to be strong enough. The alternative was just unthinkable. Like a statue, Miranda stared down at her with a calculating look that Sage knew all too well. Every child has crumbled under the scrutiny of their parents' knowing glare. Mothers especially had a unique way of silently interrogating their offspring. With little more than a look. Sage would confess anything if only her mother would say what she was looking for. Her mother's dark eyes passed over Sage's face and down her neck. Unlike the others in the building, her mother hadn't initiated any aggression. Sage took that as a sign that Miranda hadn't truly gone dark. Slowly, the black eyes returned to Sage's face, but the recognition just wasn't there. "Can you hear me, Mom?" Why isn't she speaking? Sage reached out with a shaky hand. With viper-like speed, Miranda took hold of Sage and twisted, wrenching her arm up back behind her. Sage threw her head back with a cry of pain and heard the muted crunch of bones as she connected with Miranda's face. The moment her arm was released, Sage spun back around to face her mother. "I don't know if you're still in there. Please, just stop." Black blood poured out of her mother's nose, but she showed no sign of discomfort. The scrutiny in her eyes remained. "Mom, you can fight this. You have to. Listen." Miranda lunged forward, clasping her hand around Sage's neck with an iron grip. She cut off Sage's ability to breathe. Still, Sage managed to choke out the word, "please." Her vision started to darken and her arms fell slack against her body. Seconds without air and her eyes began rolling backwards. The fight left her body. Her knees gave way as unconsciousness called her home, and she hung limply in her mother's grip, dangling between life and death. And then suddenly, the pressure released. Gasping in a deep breath, Sage found herself on the ground. She blinked away the stars in her vision as the fog in her head cleared. Where her mom had been standing, crushing her windpipe, she found Gray, weapons at the ready, freshly coated in oily black blood. Don't look, he warned. But never one to listen, she looked anyway, and instantly regretted as her eyes fell on the corpse of her mother, whose head now lay separate from her body. The fuck? She jerked backwards, throwing herself into a nearby wall. Why? Why did you do that? Would you rather she killed you? Blood dripped from his sword, thick and black as tar, joining the pool forming beneath him on the floor. Mom? Mom? She reached out a trembling hand to her mom, but stopped short of letting it hover over her body. That thing wasn't your mother. Gray's tone hit her like a slap to the face. She might have looked like it, but your mother died a long time ago. That was merely a shell. She refused to believe his words. Shell or not, her mother had been there, standing before her. There was a glimmer of recognition. She'd seen it. The hesitation, it had to have been. Miranda had been somewhere inside that shell. But, sorry, I lost my place. The hesitation, it might have been buried deep down, but it was still there inside the shell. Gray could have stopped her. He could have restrained her, locked her away until they could bring her back. But instead, she gasped for air, still choking as her lungs refused to take deep enough breath to satisfy her speeding heart. He killed her. Blood pooled around her mother's body, and try as she might, Sage couldn't tear her eyes from the sickening sight. You're lucky she didn't kill you, Gray offered more gently than he'd previously spoken to her, and as if that were some kind of consolation prize. Luck had nothing to do with this. Whatever had been done to her mother, there was no luck, nor was Sage lucky to bear witness to her death. And knowing who this woman was to Sage, Gray couldn't even bring himself to sound remorseful for ending her existence in the most final way possible. In a fit of hyperventilation, Sage couldn't get the words to make connection from her mind to her lips. Lies. Everything had been lies. Her mother's death, the danger of being out in the open, the safety behind A.S.S.E.T's walls. None of it had been true. She let herself be manipulated by stories and lies. Crying solved nothing, but racked with guilt and anger, all Sage could do was let the dam of emotions loose, and tears flooded her vision as the image of her mother blurred, along with the man who had dealt the deadly blow. I can't be here. I can't do this. She managed to stutter between sobs. Desperate to stand, her legs were as reliable as jelly, and as much as she wanted to run screaming from the building, she couldn't make a step on her own if she tried. I've got you. Gray lifted her into his arms and carried her away from the sounds of fighting that were still echoing from the main lobby. You can make your death threats at me when you've had a chance to breathe. And that was chapter 16. So, what did we think? Was it as good as I had promised, Joe? Let's see what we say. Where's the comments? Ready to be more right. I don't know that you're right. I really don't know. The bodies hit the floor. Nice, Mom. Yep. Of course she looked. Well, yeah, anytime somebody tells you don't push a button, you have to push it. Anytime somebody says don't look, you're gonna look. That's just human nature. And damn it, Gray. Yep. So what are we thinking? Do we trust Gray? Do we not trust Gray? I know that you were leaning more towards Zach last time, but are we thinking Zach's actually the bad guy, or are we thinking Gray's the bad guy? Or are we thinking Zach and Gray together are bad guys? Have we changed your opinion at all on this? I'm curious to know, Joe, since you are dead set in your opinion that Zach is our villain. I'll give you a second to answer. Looks like you are actually my only person viewing right now. Wow. I guess everybody must be out partying after all the election news. Hopefully I'll hear from them later. For those who do catch this afterwards, we are still going to be running the Bring a Friend contest. So post your comments on the YouTube comments so that I can see them. Not all comments on Facebook are showing. So go ahead and post them on YouTube and let me know who sent you to view the video, and their name will be added to our Bring a Friend list. And if you send somebody and they put your name will be added. No, Joe says, nope, not changing. Okay, so you still think it is Zach that is the villain. All right. I'll be interested to see if that changes as we go through, because this was one of the really big emotional chapters. Kind of, I explained it to you earlier, is it's the punch in the nuts chapter. Because, you know, Sage has been dying for her mom so much. Her mom would have saved the day. Her mom was her superhero, and she found her mom, but wasn't the way she was hoping to see her. And of course, with Gray being the one to finally end her, that can't be easy for Sage to deal with, especially if she's got to work with this guy. You know, I mean, they're working in the same asset office. They're bound to have to work on projects together or cases together. And how do you do that? How do you look somebody in the face who just decapitated your mom, even though he claims she wasn't your mom anymore? It's really hard to deal with. So I guess we'll have to see. But next week we'll read another chapter, and Sage is gonna have some issues. There's some major trust issues happening now, so we'll see what she does. But anyways, thank you for hanging out with me, Joe, today. And for anybody who watches this after the live broadcast, thanks for hanging out. And please do remember, check up on all of the chapters. If you need to catch up, every chapter up to this point is on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Katie Salidas. So you can catch up and find out what we've already talked about and get ready for what's going to happen next. And until then, have a great week. Enjoy the sense of relief I think that we're all feeling. And always remember to do something to make yourself happy. Take some time for you this week. I'll talk to you later, guys. Thanks for watching.